The screen fades in from black, the faint sound of squeaking sneakers echoing across a hardwood floor. A lone spotlight cuts through the darkness, revealing a battered basketball resting at center court. The air carries a hushed anticipation, as though the silence itself is holding its breath for a legend about to be told. Then, from the shadows, the story begins, not with glory, not with championships, not with roaring crowds, but with a boy in French Lick, Indiana, a small town stitched together by dirt roads, modest homes and dreams far bigger than its borders could hold. Larry Bird was not born into privilege, nor did the world announce his arrival as the chosen one of basketball. He was born into struggle, into a family that knew the meaning of hard work and the weight of hardship. His early years were marked not by gleaming trophies but by calloused hands, long days, and a relentless will to endure. For Larry, basketball was not simply a game. It was a refuge, a sanctuary where the world's noise fell silent and the ball spoke a language only he understood. Every shot that left his fingertips, every dribble on cracked asphalt, every echo of the ball against a weathered backboard was a whisper of possibility in a world that often seemed intent on telling him otherwise. Imagine the Indiana sun beating down on a young boy, sweat dripping, dust rising with every pivot. He practices alone, sometimes for hours, the air filled with the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of a ball against the ground. Neighbors glance out their windows, some shaking their heads at the obsession, others quietly wondering if maybe, just maybe, they were witnessing something rare. And in those solitary moments, Larry Bird wasn't just shooting at a hoop. He was carving a future, one release at a time, his dreams taking shape in the silence of the small-town air. The road ahead was never smooth. Poverty loomed, tragedy struck, doubts crept in. And yet, time and again, Larry Bird answered with resilience, with a stubbornness carved into his DNA, with a refusal to let circumstance define him. By the time he stepped onto the hardwood of the Boston Garden, the world finally saw what Indiana had known all along. This was not just a basketball player. This was a competitor so fierce, so unshakable, so unrelenting, that he would redefine what it meant to lead, to fight, and to win. But his story is not only about basketball, it is about grit. It is about the belief that greatness can emerge from the humblest beginnings. It is about the power of staying true to oneself in a world eager to mold you into something else. Larry Bird didn't just play the game. He played with a fire that burned deep within him, with a heart that never backed down, with a mind that saw the game in ways others could not. This is the story of Larry Bird, small-town dreamer turned Celtics legend, a tale of battles won, of rivalries that defined an era, of nights when the roar of the crowd felt like thunder shaking the rafters of the Garden. A story of triumph carved from struggle, of championships earned through sacrifice, and of a legacy that still echoes in the game today. This is more than basketball. This is the journey of a man who turned adversity into greatness, who carried the weight of expectation on his shoulders, and transformed it into history. This is Larry Bird, behind the medal. The story begins in French Lick, Indiana, a town so small that its name alone made outsiders chuckle. Yet for those who lived there, it was home, a place of roots, struggle, and survival. French Lick was not a place people usually left for glory. It was where men worked long hours to put food on the table, where families stretched every dollar, where winters bit hard, and summers felt endless. Larry Bird grew up right in the thick of it, one of 6 children in a working-class family where life was far from easy. His father, Joe, was a Korean War veteran who fought his own battles with the weight of responsibility and personal demons. His mother, Georgia, worked tirelessly to keep the family together, sometimes juggling multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Larry often remembered what it felt like to be poor, not just in money, but in opportunities. He once said that poverty was a big motivator in his life. To many, it might have been crushing, but to him, it became fuel. The cracks in his childhood were not just obstacles, they were the foundation of his grit. And in those cracks, basketball grew like a wildflower through concrete. He spent hours with the game, often alone, the worn-out hoop nailed to a shed, the sound of the ball bouncing against gravel or asphalt, the chill of the Indiana air on his skin. These were the training grounds of a legend. There were no private trainers, no fancy gyms, no applause. Just repetition, determination, and the quiet voice inside telling him to keep going. In those endless solitary sessions, his shot began to form, his touch sharpened, his instincts refined. His mother might glance out the window at dusk and see her son still shooting, sweat-soaked and dirt-streaked, refusing to quit until his body gave in. At Springs Valley High School, Bird began to attract attention, though not in the way most prodigies do. He wasn't flashy. He didn't dunk with theatrics or boast about his skills. He simply played the game the right way. Smart, unselfish, efficient, deadly accurate. Teammates admired his work ethic. Opponents grew wary of his quiet dominance. The crowd in the small high school gym could feel it. Every time Bird touched the ball, something different might happen. And while the gym roared with cheers, Bird himself never changed. He kept his head down, his focus locked, his hunger unrelenting. But life off the court wasn't so simple. His family faced turmoil, his father eventually succumbing to his struggles with depression, a tragic moment that carved deep into Larry's heart. It hardened him, gave him an edge, but it also gave him a reason to play with more purpose. Basketball became not just a game, but a lifeline, a way out, a way to make something of the Bird name. By the time he graduated high school, Larry had put French Lick on the map. Recruiters circled, opportunities emerged, and he made his way to Indiana University, the powerhouse program led by Bob Knight. Yet, despite the promise, the fit was never right. The big campus, the pressure, the unfamiliarity, it all weighed heavy. Larry Bird was a small-town boy at heart, and Bloomington felt like another world. He left after just 24 days, retreating to French Lick, back to the familiar roads, back to where he felt grounded. Some saw it as quitting, but for Bird, it was survival. In those days back home, he worked municipal jobs, painting curbs, driving garbage trucks, maintaining the town. He lived simply, quietly, but he never stopped playing. And soon, fate gave him another chance. Indiana State University in Terre Haute welcomed him, and there, Larry Bird began the transformation from small-town dreamer to national star. At Indiana State, something clicked. Away from the noise of the big city and under a coach who believed in him, Bird blossomed. The team, once unremarkable, suddenly had a spark. Fans poured into the gym, hope filled the air, and the legend of the Hick from French Lick began to grow. He wasn't just scoring points, he was elevating everyone around him. Teammates found themselves playing above their limits, inspired by Bird's leadership, his unselfishness, his refusal to lose. Game after game, season after season, the crowd swelled and the wins piled up. Then came 1979, the year that would not only define Bird's college career, but also shape the NBA for the decade to come. Indiana State, led by Bird, reached the NCAA championship game. Their opponent, Michigan State, led by a player named Earvin Magic Johnson. The stage was set for what would become one of the most iconic rivalries in sports history. The championship game was electric. Cameras flashed, fans roared, and the whole country tuned in. Larry Bird, with his stoic demeanor, lined up against Magic Johnson with his flair and charisma. Two different worlds, two different styles, yet destined to be intertwined. That night, Magic's Spartans outplayed Bird's Sycamores, delivering Indiana State their first and only loss of the season. But in defeat, Bird's legend only grew. His performance throughout the year, his leadership, and his impact on the game had been undeniable. And in that moment, a rivalry was born. One that would carry basketball into a golden era. For the Boston Celtics, watching from afar, the decision was clear. In 1978, they had drafted Bird's rights, willing to wait for him to finish college. Now, as he left Indiana State, the time had come. Bird signed a then-record contract with Boston, stepping into the storied franchise that had once been ruled by Bill Russell and Red Auerbach. The Garden awaited him, its parquet floor ready to host the next great chapter in Celtics history. When Bird first walked into the Boston Garden, the air felt thick with history. The banners hanging from the rafters, the smell of popcorn, the echo of old glory. It was intimidating, but Bird did not flinch. Reporters asked if he felt pressure carrying the weight of such a franchise. In typical Bird fashion, he shrugged it off. "I'm just here to play ball," he said. And play he did. The rookie season of Larry Bird was not a quiet arrival. It was an earthquake. The Boston Celtics, a proud franchise that had lost some of its shine in the years since Russell, suddenly found themselves reborn. Bird entered the league in 1979, and from his very first game, the energy in the Boston Garden shifted. Fans rose to their feet with every shot, every hustle play, every moment of brilliance. He wasn't just scoring points, he was making basketball fun again in Boston. Bird averaged over 21 points per game as a rookie, pulled down rebounds with ferocity, and delivered passes with vision that stunned even seasoned veterans. He played like a man who had spent years studying every angle, every weakness, every detail of the game. And in truth, he had. For Bird, basketball was never about raw athleticism. He didn't jump the highest. He didn't run the fastest. What he had was anticipation, intelligence, and a refusal to lose. He once said he always played like someone was trying to take his spot. That edge, that paranoia, made him relentless. The Celtics immediately transformed. From a struggling team, they jumped to 61 wins, the best record in the league. The Garden was alive again, the parquet floor trembling with the echoes of the crowd. Fans waved green towels, chanted his name, and reveled in the return of Celtic pride. Though the team fell short in the playoffs, the message was clear. Larry Bird had arrived, and he was here to restore Boston to greatness. And then came the draft of 1980. The Celtics made a trade that would change the franchise forever, acquiring Robert Parrish and drafting Kevin McHale. With Bird already in place, Boston suddenly had the core of a dynasty. The Big Three was born. Bird, McHale, Parrish. Three very different personalities, three very different skill sets. But together, a machine of dominance. Parrish with his quiet strength in the paint, McHale with his impossible low-post moves, and Bird with his all-around brilliance and leadership. The battles of the early 1980s were fierce, but one narrative rose above them all. Larry Bird versus Magic Johnson. Their rivalry had begun in college, but now it exploded on the grandest stage, the NBA. The Lakers, led by Magic, with their fast-break Showtime style, glitz, and glamour of Los Angeles. The Celtics, led by Bird, with their grinded-out blue-collar toughness, rooted in tradition and hard work. It was Hollywood versus Heartland, Showtime versus substance, flair versus grit. And the whole world was watching. In 1981, Bird delivered his first NBA championship. The Celtics stormed through the playoffs, and Bird, just 2 years into his career, stood atop the basketball world. Boston erupted. Fans poured into the streets, chanting his name, green confetti filling the air like a storm of joy. For Bird, it was validation, not just for himself, but for the journey, for every lonely night in French Lick, for every doubt he had overcome. But he wasn't done, not even close. The mid-1980s became Larry Bird's era. From 1984 to 1986, he achieved something only legends dare to touch: 3 consecutive MVP awards. Night after night, he torched defenses with his shooting, outsmarted opponents with his passing, and dominated games with an intensity that felt unshakable. He would walk into arenas, glance at an opposing player, and sometimes tell them exactly how he was about to beat them. And then he did. That was the edge of Larry Bird. The trash talker, the competitor, the man who used words as weapons just as much as his shot. There's a story of Bird walking into the locker room before the All-Star three-point contest. Surrounded by the best shooters in the league, he looked around, smirked, and asked, "So, who's playing for second?" Then he went out, hit shot after shot, and won the contest. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to dominate, to leave no doubt. The pinnacle came in 1984, when the Celtics faced their eternal rivals, the Los Angeles Lakers, in the NBA Finals. It was everything the league could dream of. Bird versus Magic, Celtics versus Lakers, East versus West. The series was brutal, physical, and dramatic. In Game 4, in the sweltering heat of the old Boston Garden with no air conditioning, Bird played as if fueled by fire. Sweat poured. Players gasped for air. But Bird thrived in the chaos, pulling down rebounds, hitting clutch shots, and leading Boston to victory. The Celtics went on to win the championship, and Bird was named Finals MVP. For Boston fans, it wasn't just a title. It was revenge for the heartbreaks of the 1970s, and a statement that the Bird-led Celtics were back on top. Yet the rivalry continued. In 1985, the Lakers struck back, defeating the Celtics in the finals. The loss stung deeply for Bird, who hated losing more than anything. He carried that bitterness into the next year, determined to reclaim the crown. In 1986, he delivered what many call the greatest season of his career, and one of the greatest by any player, ever. The Celtics won 67 games, including a near-perfect 41 record at home. Bird was unstoppable, orchestrating the offense with surgical precision, hitting impossible shots with confidence that seemed almost casual. And in the finals, Boston dismantled the Houston Rockets, with Bird once again crowned Finals MVP. The Garden had never been louder. The chants of "Larry, Larry" shook the rafters, the banners swayed, and for a moment, it felt as if time stood still. Larry Bird, the kid from French Lick, had climbed to the very peak of basketball. But greatness always comes with a price. By the late 1980s, Bird's body began to betray him. Years of relentless play, of diving for loose balls, of carrying the weight of a franchise on his back, began to take their toll. His back, in particular, became a source of agony. He would spend hours lying on the floor before games, stretching, trying to coax his body into one more night of brilliance. Teammates often looked at him in awe, not just for his skill, but for his toughness. He played through pain that would sideline most athletes, refusing to give in, refusing to let his team down. Even as injuries mounted, Bird remained a force. In 1987, the Celtics faced the Lakers again in the finals, delivering another chapter in the Bird Magic saga. Though the Lakers triumphed, the respect between the two rivals had become legendary. They pushed each other to heights neither might have reached alone. Years later, both admitted that their rivalry defined them, and defined the NBA. For the fans, those battles were more than games. They were events, cultural touchstones, moments etched into memory. The roar of the Boston Garden when Bird hit a clutch three, the silence of the Forum when he stole a pass and turned it into victory, the way he lifted teammates, infuriated opponents, and mesmerized crowds. It all became part of the mythology of basketball. But by 1992, the pain could no longer be ignored. Bird announced his retirement, his body unable to match the fire that still burned in his heart. The news rippled through Boston, through the league, through the world of sports. A legend was stepping away. His final stat line told the story of greatness. 3-time NBA champion, 3-time MVP, 12-time All-Star, and a member of the NBA's 50 greatest players. But numbers only told part of it. What Larry Bird gave to the game was more than points or trophies. He gave it authenticity, toughness, and heart. He showed that greatness wasn't about where you came from, but what you gave of yourself. He embodied the blue-collar ethic of Boston, of Indiana, of anyone who ever dreamed big in a small town. When his jersey was raised to the rafters of the Boston Garden, the crowd wept, cheered, and chanted his name. Bird stood there, humble as ever, thanking the fans, thanking his teammates, never making it about himself. That was Bird. Quiet, intense, a competitor to the core. When Larry Bird stepped away from the game in 1992, the NBA lost not just a player but a presence. The parquet felt different without him. The Celtics, though still a proud franchise, would enter a long stretch without their iconic leader on the floor. But Bird's journey in basketball wasn't over. He had given too much, learned too much, lived too much of the game to simply walk away. For a few years, Bird disappeared into a quieter life. He returned to Indiana, spent time with his family, and let his body recover from years of punishment. The pain in his back lingered, the scars of battles never truly gone. Yet in those quiet days, he never lost his connection to the game. He still watched, still studied, still felt the pulse of basketball in his veins. Then, in 1997, he returned, not as a player, but as a coach. The Indiana Pacers, his home state team, handed him the reins. It felt poetic, almost inevitable. The boy from French Lick coming home to lead Indiana not as a player, but as the architect of its dreams. And from the moment he stepped on the sideline, his presence was undeniable. Bird coached with the same intensity he played with, quiet but unrelenting, demanding effort, precision, and toughness. He wasn't one to rant or scream, but when he spoke, his players listened. Reggie Miller, the face of the Pacers, later said that Bird's arrival changed everything. Practices were sharper, focus was higher, belief was stronger. Bird commanded respect without needing to ask for it. In his very first season as head coach, Bird led the Pacers to a franchise record 58 wins. He was named NBA Coach of the Year, a rare feat for a first-time coach. But for Bird, it wasn't about awards. It was about building a culture, about giving Indiana what it had long craved: legitimacy, a chance to stand among the league's best. The pinnacle came in the year 2000, when Bird's Pacers reached the NBA Finals. Facing none other than the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, the Pacers battled fiercely. Though they ultimately fell short, Indiana had arrived on the grandest stage, and Bird had once again proven his ability to lead. After just 3 seasons, Bird stepped down, insisting from the beginning he would not coach longer than that. True to his word, he walked away, leaving the Pacers stronger than he had found them. But he wasn't finished shaping the franchise. Bird transitioned into the front office, eventually becoming president of basketball operations for the Pacers. In that role, he built rosters, scouted talent, and guided the organization with the same sharp eye that had once dissected defenses on the court. In 2012, he was named NBA Executive of the Year, making him the only person in league history to win MVP as a player, Coach of the Year, and Executive of the Year. It was the ultimate testament to his all-encompassing basketball mind. Off the court, Bird lived with the same modesty that had always defined him. He never sought the spotlight, never craved celebrity. He preferred quiet days, golf games, family time. He married his longtime partner, Dinah, and remained rooted in Indiana. Fame never changed him. He still spoke with the same blunt honesty, still carried himself with the same humility. He was, and always would be, the hick from French Lick, a small-town boy who conquered the world without ever abandoning who he was. Larry Bird's legacy reaches far beyond his own achievements. He and Magic Johnson together transformed the NBA in the 1980s, elevating it from struggling television ratings to a global phenomenon. Their rivalry, their battles, their shared respect built the foundation upon which Michael Jordan and the modern NBA would stand. Bird wasn't just a Celtic, he was a pillar of the game itself. Ask fans what they remember most, and the stories spill out like legends. The night he scored 60 points against the Atlanta Hawks, his opponents cheering in disbelief from the bench. The time he played a game left-handed, just for the challenge. The countless clutch shots, the fearless trash talk, the way he made the Garden shake with energy. But beyond the highlights, it was his toughness, his work ethic, his refusal to be outworked that etched his name deepest in memory. For Boston, Larry Bird will always be more than a player. He is a symbol of pride, of grit, of the city's spirit. For Indiana, he will always be the kid who proved that greatness can rise from anywhere, even the smallest of towns. And for basketball, he will forever be a reminder that intelligence, heart, and determination can outshine athleticism and flash. Even today, when young players study the game, Bird's name arises. His footwork, his shooting, his passing, his mastery of fundamentals is timeless. Coaches use him as the example of how to think the game, how to prepare, how to compete with everything you have. His career is not just history, it's a lesson. In the rafters of TD Garden, his number 33 hangs proudly, surrounded by banners of glory he helped restore. And every time fans look up, they don't just see a jersey, they see a story of poverty and pain, of resilience and rise, of battles fought and banners won. A story of how one man, armed only with a basketball and an unbreakable will, became a legend. The final whistle of his playing days may have sounded long ago, but the echoes of Larry Bird still ring across the game. In every clutch shot, in every rivalry that pushes the sport forward, in every player who dreams of rising from nothing to everything, there is a little bit of Larry Bird. And so, as the lights fade on this story, what remains is not just the memory of a Celtic, not just the tale of a champion, but the inspiration of a man who never let circumstance define him. He showed us that greatness is not about where you begin, but how fiercely you fight, how deeply you care, how fully you give yourself to the pursuit of excellence. This is the story of Larry Bird, the boy from French Lick, the legend of Boston, the rival of Magic, the champion of champions, the icon whose spirit still lives wherever basketball is played. And now, to you, the dreamers, the believers, the ones chasing greatness in your own lives, remember Larry Bird's journey. Remember the hours alone in the driveway, the pain he endured, the doubts he silenced, the banners he raised. Let his story remind you that your own obstacles can become your strength, that your own struggles can become your triumphs. Because behind every medal, behind every trophy, behind every victory, there is a story of sacrifice, resilience, and heart. This has been the story of Larry Bird, told here on Behind the Medal. If you felt inspired, if you believe in the power of perseverance, then join us in keeping these stories alive. Like, share, and subscribe to Behind the Medal, where the legends live, and where every struggle leads to greatness.